The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Friday, August the 7th, 2026, and here is our show lineup for today. In just a moment, I'll be bringing on our CEO and President, Mary Holland. We're going to be talking about Fauci in contempt. Then we are going to Ed Jones and Bob Schwartz to talk about Lindsay Clancy on trial, their take on what is happening throughout that. Then we got doctors and scientists, and Jeff and Sandy Bragg are on the fight for clean potatoes. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Mary Holland. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Polly.
Well, now let's start off with the Fauci. Let's bring up this headline now, because I know everybody's itching to ask exactly what is going on. The Senate committee votes to hold Fauci in contempt. What does this mean? What happened and what is about to happen, if you know, Mary?
Yes. So we just saw a great clip. Thank you for including that, Lou, where they took the vote. So this was the Homeland Security Committee of the U.S. Senate that Senator Rand Paul chairs. And along party lines, 8-5, they voted to hold Tony Fauci in contempt for his testimony a week ago Wednesday. What that means is that committee has now made a criminal referral to the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, that's Attorney Jeanine Pirro, for a criminal misdemeanor of Dr. Fauci. So a criminal misdemeanor carries a fine of up to $100,000 and up to a sentence of a year in jail. One of the things that Senator Rand Paul has said is that it's often the case that it would go to the full Senate, but he said there's no requirement that it goes to the full Senate. So he wants to sort of expedite the process. We don't really know what will happen in the federal with the Department of Justice, Polly. You know, he got a pardon from President Biden. President Trump has already told us that he's not going to challenge the pardon that Dr. Fauci was given. So we don't really know whether there's going to be a federal prosecution for anything that he has done, or for perjury, or for unlawfully asserting the Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination. What we do know that I think is very interesting and encouraging, Polly, is that the attorney generals for Florida, Louisiana, and West Virginia, 3 states, have already begun investigations into Dr. Fauci and whether or not he violated state laws in personally profiting from his COVID-19 advice. So one of the things we learned in the hearing last week from Senator Josh Hawley was that Dr. Fauci during COVID had 8 federal employees working for him to receive cash awards. And he, in fact, received over $1 million personally for his COVID advice, is what we understand. So I think there's potentially grounds where he may be held criminally liable because he was involved in every state in the U.S., right? He was in the newspapers. He was on the airwaves. He had federal advice going out to all of the states. So there would be what they call minimum contact. So I think it's very interesting. Also, we've learned, Polly, that his phone had not previously been subjected to investigation. We understand that his telephone, according to the Wall Street Journal, his cell phone, has been made available to further investigation by the Senate Homeland Security Committee. So this is absolutely moving forward, and we will absolutely be keeping people posted about it.
And now, Mary, what about people like Deborah Birx? I mean, she was heavily involved as well. Is it because Fauci was in charge that he's going down? Are they going to come for the others?
Polly, we know that this is way beyond Tony Fauci. This was a military operation. This was a global operation. There are lots more people involved. I think what makes Tony Fauci different and why Senator Paul has really focused his attention on him is because he absolutely undeniably perjured himself before Congress, right? He told Senator Paul, we did not, at National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Disease, we did not fund gain of function at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And his lawyers have said, in the way that gain of function was defined, we did not violate federal law. That's a lie, Polly. That's just a barefaced lie. And as the Attorney General of Louisiana said, we know he lied, we just don't know how much. So that is the basis on which he can be held in contempt by the Senate, is that he perjured himself based on his own records now in these diaries. But should there be a whole raft of other people held to account? 1,000%. We are at the very, very beginning of a COVID reckoning. And one thing that we will continue to push, Polly, is a COVID resolution by the Senate that at least says they won't do this again, right? They won't fall for any kind of propaganda that says, gee, we should just abandon the Constitution and have no First Amendment rights, that you can't speak, you can't assemble, you have to be locked in your house, we have to close down churches. That can't be the right answer ever again. And we're not there yet, Polly. So this is the very beginning. But because Tony Fauci was such an important spokesperson for the world, and because his lies are now so overt, they're so obvious, he is a very significant and important target.
And many people saying this is going to come to nothing. It never does. Ron Paul is not going to let this go. How protected is Dr. Fauci?
Polly, I think it's going to be litigated in terms of what is the extent of his federal pardon and did he have a legitimate use of the Fifth Amendment? That's going to be litigated. He has a team of 6 lawyers that were there in the room with him last Wednesday. What doesn't have to be litigated is whether or not he broke laws in these 3 states when he profited personally. Also, he gave testimony in Louisiana in the case Missouri v. Biden. He was deposed for 7 hours. And even though he answered, I don't recall, over 100 times, he also gave answers that are now provably false from his diaries that he kept on federal computer servers. So he is in very hot water, Polly, and this is not like other cases where this is going to go nowhere. We now have 3 states investigating him. There may be more. There's more information coming out, and his use of the Fifth Amendment very probably will not hold up, Polly. What he did by sort of giving his opening statement where he accused Senator Paul of an unhinged obsession, and then he said, I'm not going to talk to you because I might incriminate myself. You can't have it both ways. I think he got really bad advice, candidly. You can't have that both ways. And there is good Supreme Court precedent from 1896 that says if you are not at risk of a criminal prosecution in giving information, in that case it was a commission, you cannot assert the Fifth Amendment. He was not at risk of being held accountable for a crime by the Senate. He was at risk of perjury. And so he either had to just do the Fifth Amendment and maybe that would pass, or answer questions, but he tried to do both. And I think it's going to be litigated, Polly. It's going to be litigated.
Okay, well, Defender, CHD TV, we will keep you updated as things happen. Right, let's go to this last piece of news here. Did you want to say
Yes,
something?
I want to speak to our Kory v. Bonta win, Polly. This is really exciting, everybody. So literally, we have been litigating on behalf of Dr. Pierre, Kory, and other physicians for years now. The doctors have to be able to tell the truth as they see it. They have to be able to talk to their patients as individuals, as doctors, and this is speech, and it's protected by the First Amendment. So we took this case, Kory v. Bonta, the Attorney General of California. They passed what we consider a crazy law that said that only doctors can only advance state propaganda, essentially what Fauci was saying about COVID and other things. They can only say that. And if they vary from that, if they dissent from that, they can have their licenses taken away. So we went all the way to Supreme Court on this case. It was kind of stalled there. And there was an important decision in a different case that said, no, that's not doctor's conduct or a psychologist's conduct, it's speech. So it went back to the California Federal District Court. And in that case, Judge Shub just held that it was speech and that Bonta, the Attorney General, was prohibited in this preliminary injunction from enforcing this law. Polly, it's a big win to get a preliminary injunction. It means that based on the facts in front of the court, they believe that the party getting the preliminary injunction would win at trial. I think that Bonta and California will now, sort of desist. They will stop pushing this law. But it's a huge win in favor of medical freedom and for doctors and psychologists and acupuncturists and chiropractors and any medical professional extending the holding there to be able to tell their patients the truth as they see it. And we need that. We saw in the hospitals, as you well know, Polly, that doctors didn't tell patients the truth. They behind closed doors were saying remdesivir's run, death is near, but they were telling patients to get it. They were pushing the COVID protocols that many of them knew were deadly. So this is a really important win, and I'm very proud of Pierre, Kory, Rick Jaffe, the attorney who led this case, and all of you at CHD who helped make this possible. Thank you.
All of your donations. This is what it's about, winning. Mary, thank you so much for being on this morning. And to our viewers, Mary and I will be with you on Sunday to discuss the whole week's news in review. So Mary Holland, thank you so much for being on this morning. Okay, everybody, let's bring on Bob Schwartz and Ed Jones. And we're going to be talking about the Lindsay Clancy trial. Many of you be following it. I know I have been very closely. So let's bring them on right now. Bob and Ed, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Polly.
It's good to have you on. So I don't know which one of you wants to do this, but let's remind everybody what happened. And it's absolutely tragic case here.
Yeah, I'm glad to. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
No, you start off, Ed. You've been up there at the case.
Okay, yeah. So Lindsay Clancy was a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. She had 3 children, and when she had her 3rd child, she was experiencing postpartum depression. And so, she went to various people for help for that. And we'll get into the details of all of the various prescriptions, drugs she was prescribed. But, she started experiencing, all kinds of side effects. She and her husband went to these doctors and would say, Lindsay would say, I feel like a zombie. I'm worried about harming myself or others. And what happened was they kept prescribing these drugs. So anyway, this is a very emotional case. In January of 2023, her husband, Patrick, went out to get some takeout food. And while he was out doing that, Lindsay strangled all 3 of her little children, and then she threw herself out of after slashing her neck and her wrist. She threw herself out of her 2nd-story window, attempting to commit suicide. And Patrick Clancy came home to that scene, and he's the one that discovered those poor children. So. And it's such a tragic case because it's so preventable. And it's like there were so many times. So let me just get into how many drugs she was subjected to. 5 different antidepressants, 3 benzodiazepines, and Ambien. And so I'm going to get into a timeline of these various drugs, if I could.
Yes, please.
And this timeline is taken. Great. This timeline is taken from the medical malpractice lawsuit that has been filed, which was filed in January. So September 2022, she goes to her psychiatrist, just talking about all the stress she was under, and she was prescribed Zoloft. And she immediately had an adverse reaction to the first round of Zoloft, And this is very important. Once you've had a neurotoxic reaction, you don't respond well to other medications. So she went back to the psychiatrist, and what did the psychiatrist do? Upped her dosage, doubled the dosage. She didn't sleep for 48 hours, had racing thoughts, worsening anxiety, and felt awful. So on this issue of Zoloft, it was interesting. I watched the prosecution interviewing Patrick Clancy, who was the first witness in the case. And Patrick established that Zoloft seemed to make things worse. But the prosecutor asked him, Mr. Clancy, did you know that Lindsay Clancy only took 7 pills, as if that couldn't possibly create any problems? Well, let me tell you about a case that I write about in my book that happened in Australia in 1999. 74-year-old Australian David Hawkins, model citizen with no prior history of violence, attacked his 68-year-old wife, strangling her to death. He immediately called Australia's equivalent of 911, and the call was recorded. I have killed my wife, he said. I got tablets from the doctor yesterday, and I think they were too strong. I went absolutely wild. So anyway, the tablets David Hawkins had taken were Zoloft. He was charged with murder. At the trial, the judge accepted a defense of automatism, meaning that Hawkins wasn't responsible for his actions. Quote, but for the Zoloft, which he took on the morning of August 1st, 1999, it is overwhelmingly probable that Mrs. Hawkins would not have been killed on that morning, said the Supreme Court Judge Barry O'Keefe. So 1 or 2 pills caused that tragedy of Zoloft, okay? So that's an important to register. And then I discovered this information later. It comes from Dr. David Healy, who is a forensic psychiatrist and who has testified in several of these kind of cases around the world. And this was very striking to me. In 1983, he said, 9 years before the launch of Zoloft in the United States, 20 years before the FDA required Pfizer to put a black box warning on it, Pfizer had conducted a healthy volunteer trial on Zoloft in the UK. Quote, Pfizer recruited 12 women for this trial. Half of them were to be given Zoloft. The other half were given a placebo. The trial was due to run for 2 weeks, but it stopped after 1 week because every single woman taking Zoloft had become anxious, apprehensive, agitated. 1 or 2 had begun to voice thoughts about harming others. All of the things that led the FDA to put a black box warning on this drug 21 years later were evident in 1983. Dr. Healy said, what is more, Pfizer looked at this trial and wrote down Zoloft has caused this problem. So that's just the beginning of what she was on. Sorry to refer to my notes here. So she goes to the doctor and to the psychiatrist and continues to complain. So then the psychiatrist switched her over to Ativan and Benadryl. Ativan is a benzodiazepine, and the side effects can include severe mood changes, hallucinations, depression, suicidal thoughts. That didn't work well. Then she went to a doctor at South Shore Hospital. She was given trazodone. Then she went to another place, and a nurse practitioner prescribed Prozac. And the nurse practitioner should have done a history and have seen that Lindsay's reaction to Zoloft as a warning sign. She should not prescribe another SSRI. But she did. And, Prozac, that's got a history. The case that I write about, David Crespi, he'd been on Prozac for 7 days when he killed his twins. So and then this is what really haunts me. After 4 days on Prozac, Lindsay reported adverse effects. So then on November 25th, the nurse practitioner prescribed Ambien, Remeron, and Klonopin. And that made me think about a case that I wrote about, and that you and your viewers may remember. It was the Andrea Yates case. And I don't know if you remember that situation. It involved postpartum depression. She ended up drowning 5 of her little children in their bathtub. And what came out later was she was on 450 milligrams of Effexor, and I think the maximum amount of Remeron. And when you look into the Lindsay Clancy case, right after she started taking Remeron, she started having hallucinations, things like that. And I just learned this morning that when they analyzed her blood, Remeron was still in her blood, along with 3 other. This is like right after she killed her twins. Her 3 children. Remeron was still in her bloodstream, along with 3 other different drugs. So, this whole issue of polypharmacy and medical malpractice is just, I get emotional about it. But to me, it isn't Lindsay Clancy who should be on trial. It should be the American medical establishment, psychiatric establishment, and big pharma. That's who should be on trial.
And thank you, Ed, for that. And Ed and Bob, let's bring you both on. It's very, very difficult for people, say like me, who have never taken a psychotropic drug or any of these things at all, to understand how it can make you kill your children. Now, Lou, just bring that side effects up again of the Zoloft, please. Because it does say, does it not, on the inserts of these drugs, warning, suicidal thoughts and behavior. So you go to the doctor because you're feeling depressed, and they give you something that can make you kill yourself or other people. That is basically what that's saying.
That's right. And what's important to note is there is nothing on there about the potential to harm others, or that these drugs can cause violence. That has been, if there's any mention of it, it has been buried deep in the drug labeling so people won't see it. And so that's another thing I'd love to get into. That needs to be changed. And hopefully the FDA somebody at the FDA, Secretary Kennedy, somebody will try to get these drug companies to put stronger warnings in more blatant terms and at the top of the label. And so I'd love to get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, but what are we going to, this is great that we're covering it. I think it's so important that people understand that if you've got some postpartum depression, but I don't have any faith in the FDA. They've just approved an mRNA flu shot, for goodness sake. So I don't have any faith in any of these things. But my concern is for that young mother or all the children that the doctors just willy-nilly handing out like candy, these things. I'm concerned for them that they do not know what we now know.
Yeah, that's so true. And one of the things that I found out doing my research in the book is that for years the drug companies, after they did these clinical trials, they buried the negative clinical trial results. And early on, the FDA was complicit in helping them do that. And so there's a scene in my book where Dr. Joseph Glenn Mullen, who taught at Harvard Medical School, he confronted the FDA, and there's a YouTube video out there about this. This is 2006. He confronted the FDA in this public hearing about how they had yet to put suicide warnings for not just children, young people, but for adults as well. And they had dragged their feet for all of that for many years about that. And the reason they do that is, when you put a black box warning out about these sort of things, it hurts sales for these people, and that's all they care about. So, it's just a travesty.
It is. Now, so help me understand something. When you're on these drugs and you have these feelings that it's hard to understand, to kill your children or yourself, and then, so let's take Lindsay Clancy. Is now, I don't know whether she's still on drugs or probably in prison. I don't know what they do. But do you then, are you conscious of what you've done, or now are you just thinking what happened? How are you taken over by these drugs?
You know what? I can probably take that one, Polly, because I experienced the psychosis of these psychotropic drugs. I only took Concerta for 5 days, and it was given to me at a lethal dose. My doctor was supposed to prescribe it to me at 18 milligrams to start, and I started at 54 milligrams. And it was basically given to me as a free sample, to start, to help me focus better when I was having chronic back pain. 5 days later, I had a full-blown psychosis. What does that look like? It's very similar to the scenes from the movie A Beautiful Mind. What was happening here is, I believe, with Lindsay Clancy, is that she was on 13 different psychotropic drugs in a 4-month period time after experiencing postpartum depression, which is a temporary problem, but they tried to solve it with psychotropic drugs. And you know what? She had a severe adverse event. And these drugs, which they don't talk about, leads to thought disorder, faulty thinking, cognitive impairment, and impulsivity. It leads to that. And with these adverse events, we have to educate people to let them know what to do next. PGX testing is a new form of process to as a pre-check to let these people know that, hey, you might have a reaction to this drug, so they do these screenings. So that might be very important for patients to start off with before they're put on these type of medications. And it's just tragic if you sit back and think about it. Lindsay was a delivery nurse. She was delivering babies, and then she tragically ended up killing her own children. So it's unthinkable. It's unspeakable hardship. It's a generations of families that are tragically harmed forever, and it also harms the community. And this is going on. This is going on in our country today. We start children off with these drugs, with the mental health screening, and we have to do a better job of education about medication, better informed consent.
Yes.
And I appreciate CHD and CHD TV as far as taking up this advocacy and role. And again, it's about the education of medication.
It is, and I know we've only got a couple of minutes left. And Ed, you wanted to talk about? Was there something else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, one of the things I want to talk about is, can we use this case to convince the FDA to put clearer warnings, kind of in the name of Lindsay Clancy, that these kind of drugs can, in rare cases, cause homicidal ideation and homicides, violence, And I've been working with a wonderful woman named Dr. Linda Martin, who, by the way, has appeared on CHD before in 2022. The title of her show was "It's the biggest scandal in FDA history," but she works with a group called SONAR, the Southern Network on Adverse Reactions, and she's paired with Dr. Charles Bennett there, and they go into what's called the FDA Adverse Event Reporting System, which is a database, to collect reports on side effects and all that sort of stuff. And they have uncovered, just amazing stuff from that. And that is, like in the case of Zoloft, there have been 170 homicides reported, and then 252 cases of homicidal ideation. Prozac, 195 homicides reported, 135 homicidal ideations. And as we know, only 10% of these kind of things are really reported. So what she and her colleague want people to know is, in 2004, Health Canada put out warnings like this that we're calling for. These drugs, people taking these drugs may experience behavioral or emotional changes that may put them at increased risk of self-harm or harm to others. So, we just want to make an impassioned plea that somebody at the FDA, somebody, try to get this changed on these, because this Lindsay Clancy case might not have ever happened if somebody had forewarned Patrick and her about these potential adverse effects.
Yeah. So both of you, what do people do if they're feeling depressed and low? I mean, my personal advice, not children's health defense, is stay away from psychiatrists, stay away from pediatricians, stay away from all these people. That's my advice. There is nothing but vaccine injury and death, now psychotropic drugs injury and death, and all the others. So what can they do? How can they get help? Is there anywhere to go to make them?
It's a temporary problem. It's a diet, exercise, sleep. Find a functional health doctor out there. But if you're going down the doctor route, you could be put on these drugs first, and that could be that could be the start of a slippery, slippery road. And as Ed was saying, that these adverse events are rarely reported. Only 1% of doctors, hospitals, and patients report adverse events, and we're not getting a true, accurate count of these tragic situations, or the reactions that these patients could be experiencing. So it's patient beware.
Yeah. So if you want to get Ed Jones' book, let's put that up on the screen, everybody. It's Medication, Mental Illness, and Murder, and I presume that's Amazon, correct?
That's right. And you can learn more about it on my website, edwardleejones.com.
All right. And if you've got a story, if you have turmoil over these drugs, these medications, please contact Bob or us at CHD TV, chd.tv/contact, or Bob. You can go to his website, which is
risks.org or com, and you can watch the award-winning half-hour documentary film, If I Had Known the Risk, which tells my story, and then you can tell us your own story confidentially, and you will see all the stats that we have going on about adverse events, which again we're going to have next March 24th, National Adverse Drug Event Awareness Day, and it's a day of awareness as far as reporting these adverse events, and so we can get to fixing this problem. Polly.
Look, I can't thank you both enough for being on. Please do come back and update us. And I know we'll see you again, Bob, with a great many more stories, sadly, that we need to be showing on CHD. But thank you, both of you, for being on this morning.
Thank you, Polly.
Thank you for your time, Polly.
Of course. And now we're going to go to Doctors and Scientists with Brian Hooker.
The power we have is the truth.
This is the nation's leading conference.
It's so empowering to be joining together and working for our children.
Coming to CHD was the best decision that I've made probably all year.
It is a new day when senators and representatives want to associate themselves with Children's Health Defense. Why? We're telling the truth, and they know that. And because people are listening to us, and they know that.
To me, health on a political level is the most important subject. We need to raise a healthy generation.
We, the people, are waking up. We are taking back the system.
The federal government's job is not to ensure the stable legal risk for vaccine manufacturers.
Remember, we're a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I can't say it any better.
We can live to see a better day where people will be healthier and where government and corporations will be forced to be more responsible.
You can't be a decent human being and know what we have now come to learn and turn your back on it and close your eyes.
Well, good morning, CHD. Welcome. It is Friday, so that means that it's time for doctors and scientists. I'm really excited to have these guests back. They are in the midst of the swirling and wild roller coaster ride of the potato industry. We'll bring them on, Jeff and Sandy Bragg. Jeff and Sandy, welcome back to the show. This time you're joining us from New Mexico, is that right?
That's correct.
Oh,
we live in
good.
the Four Corners of New Mexico.
You're in the Four Corners, and you're growing potatoes down there as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. Sandy and I were invited to move down to do a low glycemic organic potato project in 2020, just as COVID was unraveling.
A low glycemic potato. That almost seems like a contradiction of terms to me. But you guys are the wizards. You are the modern day Luther Burbanks of the potato world. So what goes into breeding a low glycemic potato?
Well, for one, it took a lot of effort from the University of Idaho, Washington State University, Oregon State in this, but they started realizing that there was differences and consumer complaints back in the early 2000s of issues with diabetes and correcting things. And so that's when the breeders started looking into things. And one of the breeders in Idaho, he worked in the extension service. He actually found it, and they first found it and they loved the taste and texture of it. But then doing lab tests in Montana states when they realized that there was bigger things happening with it, with the glycemic index.
And for clarity, it's called the tri-state, and it's the three northwest states of Idaho, Washington, and Oregon that actually own this potato. But food scientists in Montana, they were testing all these different varieties, and they were also doing human testing with the strips. Right. And so they were onto it, and then they saw coalitions with the cells underneath the microscope. That was their first hint, probably 15, 20 years ago, that, hey, this is different. And what we're seeing in the lower glycemic, these certain type of cells are showing up. So
interesting.
That was pretty exciting.
What does that do to, like, so I'm eating my French fries. Okay, the full disclosure, I do eat French fries. And according to my son, I hope they're not GMO. Dairy Queen is the best. But you guys can probably tell me. I think Golden State Food is all GMO, right?
Yeah, Golden State Food. I don't know who Golden State Food is.
Yeah,
that's McDonald's.
Oh, McDonald's has refused to put it in yet.
Oh, good. No GM.
No GM.
No GM. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad.
No, actually, where you'll see them most likely is they tried to put them in as fresh cut fries because they were so wonderful.
You have invested so much of your life and livelihood, helping people, helping farmers, helping young farmers. What is it like when sort of the GM revolution, starting in 1996. It started with soy, it didn't start with potatoes, but in 1996, when that blew through, what was your guys' position and posture then, and what was that like?
I would say we were unaware and in the dark.
I was a farmer, but I started my career as a French fries and potato specialist as a
Right.
consulting agronomist. And so I worked with all of the companies, Monsanto, DuPont, you name it. I worked with Union Carbide, all of the different chemical and fertilizer companies. And so but my dad kept a environmental approach to me because I grew up on a very rotational animal crop rotational farm with
Right.
my father had a deep love for water and taking care of soil. And so it worked out just perfectly that I kept that on when I was ever doing anything. We used Roundup occasionally, glyphosate, but it wasn't
Yeah.
something that I was always skeptical of mass using it. And at the 90s too, when this was all going on, I was there. That's when they were also trying to introduce the Nature Mark Monsanto potato.
Right.
And so as the research vice president for the potato growers of Idaho, I had to meet them in Boise. And that's when I met them the first time, seeing what they would like to see happening. And they flat told me that I needed to buy their seed, or in the future, farmers wouldn't have seed.
That's a threat right there. That
Yeah.
is, absolutely, you're being threatened by big ag.
Yeah.
At that point in time, and Monsanto ruled the roost. I mean, I'm not sure where they are now, but I remember those days because I was using the potato tops to make blood products, genetically modified blood products. We threw away our tubers and we used them for seed. We didn't eat them, which I'm very, very thankful for. But I was not educated in 1996 either. I did not know. When you had this epiphany, what did you see around you? Were a lot of the farmers early adopters of GM crops and GM potatoes, or was it, because it seemed to me like it really spread like wildfire?
Well, it had to do, first of all, in the 90s. Let's step back, and that's the NAFTA era.
Right.
And I think really ought to be a session that you have sometime down the road of what happened during NAFTA. We grew up in the Magic Valley of Idaho, where I did. Sandy grew up in northern Idaho, but together she saw us working with seeds and things. We grew beans, peas, corn, malt barley for Anheuser-Busch, you name it. We were doing all kinds of different development, but NAFTA was coordinating entry of intellectual property rights both into Canada, and then at the same time there was interactions between Canada, Mexico, and buyers in the United States that were controlling everything. And we didn't know that was really going to happen. And then the real epiphany was going to a potato meeting in the late 90s where a big food company bought out Ore-Ida, and at their appreciation dinner for the potato growers of Idaho, they introduced us to a map of Canada. So,
Oh no.
And us growers we all raised around 1,000 acres apiece, and we had a big team, but it took us over 2 months of working 16-hour days sometimes, most
Right.
times, that crop out. And I just don't even know if anybody can imagine the passion that a grower had to deliver that crop to Ore-Ida or Simplot or Nestle's or whatever.
Right.
We were really proud, all of us farmers, and we were all family people, so we cared about the crop because
Right.
we all had a lot of kids and grandkids, you
Right,
know.
right. Well, you cared about the
It's a
crops, you
beautiful
cared about your
thing.
neighbors, and
Oh, did we?
there's so much
yeah, we
so much
did.
of that was driven out.
Well,
Yes.
and that's why I brought up the 90s NAFTA, because it was an unsettling. All of the seed companies went away in
Mhm.
NAFTA. There was probably 40 or 50 seed companies in the Magic Valley of Idaho, and they were gone. Simplot and what bought up the grain part of it. So then there
Right.
was nobody to sell your grain to anymore unless you sold it to them. And
And
so it was power and control.
yes, it was.
And the big players And then we started hearing people's names like Syngenta and other names that we
Right.
had never heard of before. But the problem was they knew how to get that seed developed, and the seed is the start of agriculture.
And at the same time in the 90s, I remember I worked for agriculture economics on and off for 30 years through the University of Idaho. And they asked me to input The Economist 100 years of every dairy product you can imagine by day, week, month, and year. And Idaho soon became a large dairy state, but I could see systematically the big players were taking out the infrastructure from all the small communities. So it was hard for a farmer to even sell what they grew because there was no company to sell it to.
No,
They would
that's
keep wiping the companies out.
Consolidation, and I was in a co-op, and I was a founding secretary of the Snake River Potato Growers Co-op. And what happened then is and it happened in all crops. People that were hooked to the right people in the co-op went and hooked up to the buyers who weren't even local buyers, and that set up the whole chain of production. And lots of people went by the wayside.
It became corporate so quickly. You've been involved in litigation as experts around potato growing, and then probably other crops as well. I mean, you've grown a lot of different crops. What was it like going up against big ag? I mean, to me, that seemed really, really daunting. Early in my career, I made a little discovery of something that you could express in potatoes called coagulation factor 8. And as soon as I did that, that was a primary hemophilia drug. And as soon as I did that, then Bayer ran a smear campaign on my research. It's like, my goodness, I all of a sudden I've got a tiger by the tail because I had the audacity to throw a gene in potato and it actually worked. Again, this was for medicinal purposes. This was bloodless blood products, but going up against big ag and big pharma, big industry, whatever, it's daunting.
Well, it's daunting. And when we were asked to be expert witnesses in a big law case against the GMO potato and the innate
this was
potato
just a year ago a little over a year ago.
Okay.
It took for 2 to 3 years to find people that would even testify, or even it took them 3 years to even find the right people to know anything about it. It just took me back. I'd have to close my eyes, but it took me back to the Potato Growers of Idaho, sending me to a oligopoly training in Boise, Idaho, where I was supposed to learn about oligopoly. And then I realized, now I realize the oligopoly guy is in Boise and in that surrounding area right there. And you better not say anything, or because they don't like if you don't take their way.
Right.
And I've observed Jeff, when he was talking to the attorneys and things, just explaining all the documents after he would read them, he was fine at home. But if we would have to fly for depositions or anything, he was very stressed out. Yeah, it was very kind of scary a little bit. Yes.
I can't imagine. I've been involved in a few court cases. Usually they're a little more reserved than that. When you've seen this, the sort of GM revolution take over and the corporatization of farming, were there cases around? I'd seen very early on that all of a sudden, so that just through either gene drift or just seed blowing on somebody's property, all of a sudden they were growing GM crops without their knowledge, but Monsanto would march in and would sue them for patent infringement.
That did happen.
And very possible.
People in Oregon and other places that went up against it, strong people.
Because the bees, the beneficials buzzing around from one flower to another, they don't have any idea what they're doing.
And
then the wind blows. Exactly.
And it's that's one of the things I brought up to the lawyers in this court was that you are messing with
Mother Nature.
Well, you're messing with the Idaho potato industry too,
Right.
which Idaho potatoes are supposed to be famous, but they aren't famous when they just let genetic drift into the Idaho crop.
And just a summary of many thousands of documents that Jeff read, and we would go over things. The way that companies treat the farmer was absolutely horrible. There was internal emails amongst the big boys saying that this is a horrible potato. What are we supposed to do? And they would not tell the farmers for months, and it would end up, and they're called daily weight slips, a daily, run slips. And the farmers would have to wait sometimes a month to hear, and it was literally costing them money to run their own crop.
Right.
The potato was so bad. And so there was a lot of bad energy and treatment of humans in this case.
I had a role in this too, because in 2011, I was approached by the Simplot company to see if they'd be interested in us at Green Giant growing the seed for them. And I liked our seed program, and I didn't accept that because I knew of the drift.
Right.
It had nothing to do that I was not a good businessman or anything else. It meant that I couldn't do it. And then 2 years later, I decided to leave and turn it over to the Green Giant company, and I walk away. I didn't expect the clobbering and everything else to go along.
So the seed company Jeff was working for and developing for actually went into business with Simplot on the GMO. And I think it was a big mistake, and a lot of bad things happened to the farmers in that area. They're foreclosing, they're losing their farms and everything.
That's really too bad.
And we were shocked that they were actually planting this way back, starting in about 2015, 16, pretty heavy.
Right. Is there any labeling? Is there any, I sit down in a restaurant, maybe an unfamiliar restaurant, and I order some fries. Okay. Full disclosure, I eat fries. Full disclosure, my autistic son eats fries. It's a staple. How do we know that whether we're consuming GM product or not?
It is so difficult anymore. You'd have to, in this case, I saw it on the label of when I saw it the first time.
So be sure to read your labels at the store. But there is something called the Dark Act, and that was passed just a few years back. And GMO does not have to be present on the label. So that's why in a lot of stores you see GMO free or non-GMO.
Well, they'll say contains a bioengineered food. They will say
bioengineered.
But in the case of the potatoes, it gives you this nice story how the potato carries the best genes of wild and scientific traits and helps the potato just last longer forever, so it'll be good in your belly.
It's polar opposite of it really is.
It won't get out of your belly.
I can tell you horror stories about GM, genetically modified gut flora, with like new leaf potatoes and BT corn.
We know that.
Well, her and I we grew new leaf potatoes in 2000.
And we didn't eat them.
In 1999 because of that threat.
I'm glad you didn't eat them.
Sandy and I planted 60 acres of a 120 acre pivot of GMO Nature Mark New Leaf. Yeah. And Nature Mark New Leaf. It sounds so pretty. And,
right.
But the plants didn't look right. The potatoes had a end that kind of cupped together. It didn't look right. But I will say they got better than when I worked with the GMO potatoes in the late 1980s and early 1990s with a company called Plant Genetics.
When did you make the jump to hyperspace to go GM free?
I never ever grew a GM crop other than that nature.
We tried it.
The new leaf potatoes, right?
It didn't look right. I didn't cross my lips.
Right.
And it was the only potatoes, though, that Sandy and I got paid for in 2000 of those, because the company from Canada that had bought out Ore-Ida, they did honor the contract. And
Right.
so we only lost several million that year. It was just, yeah, I laugh now, but wasn't a laugh. And
No, I'm sure it wasn't.
Idaho is still going on with big corporate ag in the potato industry. So Jeff and I really liked New Mexico when we first came here. So we've actually permanently moved here. And we are in a great state to try to promote better potato varieties for French fries, for mashed potatoes, for bakers, some that are low in sugar, some that are low GI, and great flavor with everything. So we're just keep searching for better health properties in the potato world.
I'll tell you what the industry thinks of Annie and I've done a lot of work. In 2021, we, with New Mexico State University and with a large Navajo farm here, we actually did a low glycemic world program that we were actually every week meeting by Zoom, talking to people in the Netherlands to try to get lined up for low glycemic foods. Unfortunately, we had spud bags. It was called SPUD, Sustainable Potatoes to Undermine Diabetes. And we had 500 grow bags throughout New Mexico with the Huckleberry Gold potato in them. But the potato industry shut that down in 2021 and actually said that they don't follow the glycemic index and they will only use the American Diabetes Association.
This program was 500 bags. They all had their own number. We all had a Facebook page. All the members were learning so much and wanted it again. But we were surprised when a lady came from Boise, Idaho area, Kuna actually, and took over the research station within a year and shut the program down. And that was directly tied back to Simplot.
Well, she's now in charge of the J.R. Simplot School of Ag at the University of Idaho.
So they're invading these educational institutions, you know, like the the Institute of Biological Chemistry at Washington State, the School of Ag at University of Idaho. Are there researchers left that can do independent research without having to wind through all the shenanigans of big ag? I mean, are there independent researchers that can still do that? I mean, besides you guys on the farm, it just doesn't seem like
it's really difficult.
I do see though that some states are better than others.
Okay.
But yes, you both of you guys are right. When the big industry hears about something good, they kind of get involved and try to do away with it. I've been shocked how much good Jeff and I've done over the last 15 years, and people, try to shoot it down. And today we're literally selling gorgeous 5 varieties of potatoes fresh in Durango, Colorado at the Natural Foods Co-op. And we're told by the checkers that people cry when our potato supply runs out, and it's a rush when they hear they're back in.
Well, you're doing something right. This is what the consumer wants, and unfortunately, we're getting junk that is literally pushed down our throats instead.
They are, and literally that's why there's not better potatoes out there in the market. And I was telling Matthew about, he was talking about boiling potatoes and everything else.
Right.
We've actually found sugar stable potatoes that are so sugar stable, it scared these people at these French fry companies because they did not own the property rights to them.
Oh my goodness.
But I wanted to tell everybody about New Mexico. They're pretty exciting for me in the ag world. New Mexico has a goal of producing 65% of the food that the children in the schools eat and the elderly have in the nursing home by 2033. They know to support their small growers. I even work with a young gentleman, 28 years old, and he just put in a bid to the school for his potatoes. And it's beautiful to see. And if I could put a word out to everybody, the farmers markets in New Mexico are growing. Each community is building bigger and better buildings to have the farmer markets longer than just the season. Everybody is supporting each other with grow local meetings.
Good.
And it's just a wonderful thing. It's through the San Juan Food Hub program. So these food hub programs could really do a lot. But what I want to tell everybody is if you want some exercise and you know of a young farmer out there, I know that almost all young farmers are struggling with getting help in labor. It's very, very hard to get anybody to work for you. And so we donate time to 2 different young couples. Maybe I only can work up to 3 hours a day, but it makes me feel so good when I do, and it helps them so much to become better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's such good work that you do, and supporting, I love going to farmers markets because you can talk to the people who actually grew the food.
Oh, yes. And in the last 3 to 5 years, it's really changed the energy. Everybody really wants clean food. So people are putting up, chemical free, or they're saying, ask us about our produce and things like that. So that's wonderful.
It's amazing. We've got to get the hands back of young people, and we want to see people start more restaurants too. That's how you have more fast foods. You create more restaurants.
Right. Well, and you find these restaurants that buy locally,
yes,
and they know, when you talk to the farmer, you can ask the farmer directly, is this a GM crop? You can ask those questions. Is this certified organic? Does this contain glyphosate? I was recently in Italy, so I had like completely glyphosate-free wheat. And I tried to have it like every meal that I was there in Italy. But there's, you can ask the questions. I think it's so important that we support our local farmers, and I'm excited for what you guys are doing in New Mexico. Whereabouts are you located in New Mexico now?
We're in the Four Corners.
In Aztec.
In Aztec. Okay. Is it irrigation farming there, or is it's primarily?
Yes.
Okay.
Irrigation farming. There's tons of small farms here. When Big Ag started filtering out areas with old co-op models, a lot of the farms went away. So there's tons of little farms in New Mexico, tons.
And I did a historical reading on Farmington, New Mexico. They used to have so many peach trees, apple orchards, and watermelon that people would come. This is 100 years ago, probably, come to get this produce, this fruit that was grown here. And it's all gone now.
It's the big farm there. They're very, very productive and whatnot, but it's more of the big agriculture.
Right. It's monoculture.
It's monoculture. Oh boy.
We need diversity very, very much.
We need diversity. And I'm so thankful for you guys. Thank you for coming on the show today. It's always a treat to have you back. It's been too long. And God bless you and your work in New Mexico. It sounds absolutely wonderful. I mean, you're swimming against the stream, but you are truly, with the crops that you grow, you're making America healthy again.
Oh, we're loving it. Thank you for having us.
That means a lot. You inspire us.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining this important episode of Doctors and Scientists. Share, share, share so people can come out and see Jeff and Sandy Bragg. If you're in the Four Corners area, look them up. Do you guys have a way that people can reach out to you and find out more about what you do?
Absolutely. We give people our phone number actually, or
Okay.
everythingpotatoes@me.com is my email address.
And it's superfoodconsulting.com is where they can, that's your website?
Yes.
And then
Oh,
he
and
has an
Everything Potatoes, there it is.
There's Everything Potatoes on
That's his,
Facebook.
yeah. Everything Potatoes was our first company. When we were younger, we were really growing the upper generation crops.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
yeah.
Well, thanks again. Really appreciate you coming out. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great Friday. Go eat some non-GM potatoes.
Please.
Potatoes are good for you.
Please.
And
Exactly.
Blessings. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
So can you tell us your name, please?
Yes, it's Monique Abraham.
Okay, and this is about your daddy.
Yes.
All right. First question I'm going to ask you is, did your dad take the COVID-19 vaccine shot?
No.
And do you know why he didn't?
It was not around then, actually. It was April of 2020 is when we lost him.
Okay. All right. So what led him to go to hospital?
He was having a stomach virus, him and my mom both. My mom had gone to her dentist to get a tooth fixed, and they suddenly became sick with a stomach bug type thing. Couldn't keep anything down. And my sister even went to check on him because she's a nurse, and she was going to try to give him were they intravenous, to help, because he was dehydrated.
Fluids.
Fluids. And his skin was so dry. And then he seemed to be okay. And then the next morning he was walking, and he says that he tripped, but my mom said he passed out in the bathroom. And then he got back up and he said he was fine, but my sister took him to see their doctor at Vanderbilt. And then they suspected he might have COVID because his oxygen level was, I think, 82 or 85, something like that. And he had this stomach bug going on. In fact, they had spoken to their doctor before this, both of them, because they both were sick, but he just was not getting better. And then he'd get better, and then he'd get feeling sick again. And she begged him not to go to the hospital. My sister did not want to take him to the hospital, but he wanted to go because he, didn't want to be a pain to anyone. But he also felt like that they were going to take care of him because that's what you think hospitals do. And she told him, "Daddy, don't you croak on me." And he said, "I won't croak on you. I'll be back good as new." And we never came home. Sorry, I get emotional. And so it was a very long week. We had people praying for him. He was sick, with the stomach thing. And then when he got to the hospital that day, I spoke to him, and he said he felt great. He felt like eating a cheeseburger. He talked to the boys and I kept telling him, "Dad, we got the whole," because my husband's a pastor, and I said, "We got the district praying for you, Daddy." And he said, "It's all right. God's looking out for me. I got a great doctor and a great nurse. They're taking good care of me, and I'll see y'all soon. I feel great. And I'll eat a cheeseburger with the grandsons," and he was kidding around with them. And then he said, "But I got to get off the phone because they're talking about putting me on a vent." And I said, What do you mean they're putting you on a vent? You can breathe fine." He said, "Well, they think that they've looked at some, they were seeing something, I guess, about his lungs or something." But then we didn't really hear anything back. So, when you don't hear back, you think that's good news. And then what I understand, he was prone on his stomach. And then he aspirated, and that's when it got really bad. And one of the people there was trying to help get him vitamin C, and I got on the phone that night and begged the doctor to call me. Didn't get a call back. the nurse was there. I talked to the nurse and I said, please help my dad. He's not a guinea pig. I just want him to come home. We love him. The world needs Frank, you know, that was his name, Frank Carter. And she called me a live wire. And that really hurt, but I didn't think anything of it. I just wanted my dad to get vitamin C.
How did she say that to you?
She called me a live wire.
In what context?
Just really nasty. Yeah. And I just said that, you know, this is my dad. He needs to come home. He's got a lot of people that need him. And it was very hurtful, but I looked past that. And then we kept getting, I can't remember exactly because it's so long ago. It seems like it'll be 4 years. Well, it has been 4 years. And we basically, when the hospital called us, they said this new stuff called remdesivir is the bee's knees for COVID patients. And they just get going on and on about, but it was going to be on a placebo trial. That's what this was going to be. So we wouldn't know if he had it or not. But obviously he had it because he didn't come home. And we kept praying that he was going to come home, and he never did. And we got some bad news. I think it was around 3 a.m. My mom called me, and I remember I woke up and the Bible was across me because I've been praying all night for him. And she said, your daddy's dying, and Nicole's going to, that's my sister, she's going to Vanderbilt because they told her to hurry and get there because he's not going to make it. Well, my sister told me because my mom's been having some heart issues. She's having a heart valve replacement soon, so that's why she's not here today. And we were talking, and I was talking with her, and she basically said they told her that his heart would be the first thing to go. And that's not the truth. It was the last thing to go. And they wouldn't give him anything. They kept saying that's not good for his heart. I begged, for the other stuff that I'd heard that might help him, but they wouldn't listen. I just felt like they were really just very cold when we would talk to them. And then my dad actually was on the news. They talked about, because my dad was such a giving person, he had told them if he didn't make it, that he wanted to donate his body to help people with this disease. He said it was evil, this evil virus. So they had his brain donated to research, and they did a news story on NBC about him, and that was a few days after. So it was really hard. It was hard for all of us. We couldn't have a funeral. He died April 13th of 2020, and we didn't have his funeral till October of that next year. So it was hard.
The most difficult bit listening to this is that 1 minute he's talking to you, wants a cheeseburger, feels great, and in the same conversation he goes, oh, I have to go because they want to vent me. That bit doesn't make sense.
No.
Why are they venting what appeared to be a perfectly healthy man who wanted a cheeseburger?
Absolutely.
Obviously he had enough breath to talk to you, said he felt great. That doesn't make sense.
No. It does. And then when you look back and think about all the things that were going on with it, I just think, why? Like, the other day, and this is a totally different thing, but when we took my mom, I don't have any trust in hospitals, and neither does my mom, but she had to go to a hospital for her heart. And when the woman looked at me and said, you go get something to eat, I'll watch her like my own mother. I said, why couldn't they have done that for my dad? And why couldn't we be there with him? They wouldn't even allow us in there with him because of this dangerous disease. And, it really hurts because...
Did your mum get the COVID shot?
No.
She didn't get it.
She won't get any vaccine. She even told them that the other day when they asked if she was vaccinated. Nope, she's not doing any more vaccines. No. And, but she had COVID. They had both, like I said, they had COVID. But they were at home with a stomach bug. In fact, the health department sent her a letter telling her if she left her front porch, she would be arrested. That's what the letter said. And then she called them, because you got to know my mom's very spunky. She tells you like it is. She's a Southern belle. And when they called her, she called them right back, and she left a message saying, you're going to have to put a guard on my front door if you don't want me walking to my mailbox. I just lost my husband, and they called and apologized. And I actually have the letter here to prove, from what happened. But it was hard for her. And that's why I do this for my dad, because I'm hoping that people will listen. I've write so many letters. I even gave in person to our governor of Tennessee. I handed it to him, telling him that how they're still killing people in the hospitals with their remdesivir, even the babies. And they even changed the name to Veklury. But I do have to give credit to someone who really helped me to realize about what was going on with Vanderbilt and how all this seems to be their kind of ground zero to all of this disaster. He wrote, his name is Charles Wright, and I saw an article that he had written about Mark Dennison at Vanderbilt and the whole COVID and all of the SARS-1 and SARS-2 and all of that in Chapel Hill. And they're all tied in with it. And when I start thinking about, they even, this will blow your mind, they were given an award for giving remdesivir to patients at Vanderbilt. Look it up. It was very sickening for me. And these same people are on our steps in Nashville at the Capitol every day, because when I talked to our senator, he said, Vanderbilt's powerful. And I know they are. But it doesn't matter. They shouldn't have done what they did. And I've met so many people that lost their loved ones in other hospitals that said that they were following the Vanderbilt protocol. So I just want to know why. Why couldn't they help my dad? Because he helped so many people, and he was a good man. And, I know he was 82, and everybody says, well, he was older. No, there's no excuse for that. Every life is worth something to God, and we're all, in God's eyes, equal. And besides, what happened to the Hippocratic Oath? I think I'm saying it right. That was supposed to be where they would do whatever they could to save your life. And instead it was all about money and killing people, of what I understand now, is what it seems like. But it's hard when you tell people what happened and they look at you like you're crazy. And I've even had people tell me, you sound crazy. They didn't do that to your dad. You're just imagining things. But I think that's what happened. I'll always think that.
Wow. It's a tragic story. I'm sorry. Is there anything else you want to add to this story?
Yes, please. I do want to add that my dad was a retired lieutenant colonel. He served his country. He was in the Cold War. He was on the border and protected the Czech border at that time. And he put his life on the line for his country. And when I heard someone one day say to me that the same government that he put his life on the line was a part of all of this, it really bothered me. And I just want answers. I think everybody needs answers. And I think that it's time that everyone has to face what really happened and stop trying to gaslight us on everything and tell us what really happened and why they allowed this protocol to go on so long. And, I wish people had listened to my story earlier, because maybe that's why I'm doing this today. I want to save lives. Nobody else needs to die in these hospitals like they did with my dad.
Very well said. Thank you very much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you.
Thank you.
Put your dad's picture on the
Thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.